Welcome to the 2024 year ahead horoscope for Pisces Sun and Rising. Now, I made this specifically for Pisces Rising, but of course you could watch it for your sun sign or for whatever other planet that you have in Pisces. So, before we begin going through month by month, I just want to go over the major transits of 2024 just so we have a good idea of what we're looking at. Now, I already did a general overview of 2024 where I kind of just go over, the basic meaning and significance of all these major transits. So if you haven't watched that video already, go ahead and check it out. But the big things that we've got going on this year are, number one, Pluto is ingressing into Aquarius. This is going to happen on January 20th. And for the majority of this year, Pluto is in Aquarius. By September, Pluto will move back into Capricorn for 2 months. And then on November 19th, Pluto will move back into Aquarius. Well, it will stay for pretty much the next 2 decades. So this is our last little stint of Pluto and Capricorn, and we get Pluto in Aquarius for essentially forever. Then we get to there we go. Sorry, my iPad froze up. Then we get to April 20th. This is when we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. This, in my opinion, is the best transit of the year. I think this is the most exciting one. It's in a little bit of a weird place for you guys, but I think there's a lot to look forward to there. Then on May 25th, Jupiter is going to enter Gemini. This is also a weird situation for you guys. We'll talk more about it as time goes on, but Jupiter is typically a good planet. It's just in a weird area in terms of like what everything else looks like. We'll get into it. Venus, Cazimi, and Gemini on June 4th. There's a lot of Gemini transits happening at the late spring, early summer. So there's a lot of fourth house action, a lot of focus on your home, your family, and your living situation. And then we get to the more bigger long-term meta transit this year, which is the Jupiter-Saturn square. Now, we get 2 of these. The first one's going to be on August 19th, and then the second one's going to be on December 24th. There will be a third one in 2025, but those will be in different zodiac signs. Now, this is kind of what I was meaning with Jupiter in Gemini. It comes with some caveats, which is it will square Saturn. So it's not just like, oh, Jupiter is going to be going through your 4th house. You will expand your living situation. It comes with some limitations, and so we'll discuss that. And then we get to the end of the year, which is the Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer. At the very end of the year, it will only be retrograding in Leo, but then by the beginning of 2025, it will go back into Cancer. This is arguably the worst transit this year. However, there is the way to look at 2024 is that it's a build up to 2025. And I think this Mars retrograde really kind of like brings that energy because, again, Mars will be retrograde at the beginning of the year and it won't station direct to like March of 2025. And then from there on out, everything will start to ramp up. So before we go month by month, make sure you like this video. If you're liking what you're seeing, comment below. I want to know what month you're looking forward to the most. I want to know what month you're looking forward to the least. And I want to know if anything is lining up with like what your own predictions are or what your plans are for 2024 as well. Subscribe if you haven't already to be up to date with all of the transits that are going to be happening throughout 2024. Also, if you want to know specifically when a transiting planet is hitting something specifically to your birth chart, go ahead and go over to my website and download the transit calendar I have for both iCalendar and Google Calendar. If you look here on my phone, these little orange markers, I can't really get the best view here. But like, for example, today I have Venus squaring my Neptune. It's right there on my calendar. I don't have to open up an app and I can click it. And there's an interpretation with it too. So you don't have to open up an app. And plus, it helps support the channel. It's only like $20. And also, if you want to get a really full in-depth detail of what 2024 and even 25 and 26 are going to look like for you, feel free to book a consultation with me at the link below. So let's get to January. So the big things that we have going on January is going to be, number one, Mercury is stationing direct. Now, what I like about the beginning of 2024 is on January 31st, December 31st of 2023, Jupiter stations direct. And then by January 1st, Mercury is going to station direct. So by literally the first of the year, every single planet is moving forward. Nothing is retrograde. So I think that's just nice in terms of starting the year off on like a good foot. But Mercury is going to be stationing direct in your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. At the end of December, or I should say halfway through December, Mercury went retrograde in your 11th house of friends, community, and networks. And then Mercury went backwards into your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. So there might have been some miscommunications and some delays regarding career and friends and networks and communities. That all gets resolved by this point, and now there's like more of a forward movement feeling going on with career and reputation. Mercury will still be in detriment, so it's not like everything makes super clear sense, but at least there's a forward movement here. Then when we get to January 4th, we will have Mars ingressing into Capricorn. Now, something to keep in mind throughout this video is knowing whether or not if you were a day chart or a night chart. If you look at your birth chart and the sun is above the ascendant and the descendant, that means that you are a day chart, and if it is below it, you are a night chart. And why this is important is this is going to differentiate which planets are more on your team and which planets are not really on your side, and they're a little bit more difficult to work with. If you are a day chart, Mars is much more frustrating and more difficult to work with versus Saturn is much more on your side. Saturn's much more on your team. If you are a night chart, it is reversed. Mars is on your side and Saturn's not necessarily on your side. It's a little bit more frustrating and difficult to deal with. So keep that in mind as we have Mars going into Capricorn. Mars will enter your 11th house of friends, networks, and community. So there's two ways to look at this. Number one, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So Mars does really, really well in Capricorn. It's very strong. So when it comes to fights, conflicts, energy, ambition, just being driven, there's a lot of action going on with friends. So maybe you're spending a lot more time with friends. Maybe you're doing a lot more work with friends. Mars rules your second house of money, and it also rules your ninth house of spirituality, religion, publishing, far distance traveling, teaching. And so there might be something to do with money and finances as well as publishing, far distance travel related to friends. Now, again, if you're a night chart, this seems like it's going to be much more about energy and spending time with friends. However, if you're a day chart, this might involve more fights and conflicts with friends and networks and community. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. And then when we get to January 20th, this is when we're going to have Pluto ingress into Aquarius. Now, Pluto's going into your 12th house, okay, of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, hidden enemies, self-sabotage. And in this video, I'm not going to be able to explain fully like what Pluto in your 12th house is going to look like, because guess what? It's going to be there for 20 years. And at the end of the day, it rules transformation. And over a 20-year period, yeah, you're going to go through some sort of a transformation. But I think the easiest way I can explain it is I want you to think about March of 2023 till about June of 2023. That was when Pluto first ingressed into Aquarius. And I want you to think about the vibe shift that occurred for you during that time. Pluto has been in Capricorn in your 11th house for like 16 years. So this has involved a lot of death and destruction and corruption and empowerment, disempowerment, and just overall transformation with networks, friends, communities. Now that Pluto's going into your 12th, that same energy is now happening with your subconscious, fears, phobias, isolation, alienation, and this whole area of your chart is kind of going through a rebirth. And that might take a death. And when I mean death, I mean that more metaphorically than I do literally. But Pluto going in your 12th house is like just realizing how strong your subconscious beliefs are and how powerful, you know, if you have shitty beliefs or if you like to do self-sabotage, you're just going to see how powerful it is. It's going to be much more immediate and in your face. And that's kind of how we get into February, because February is all 12th house stuff for you guys. Number one, on February 13th, we will have Mars conjoining Pluto as it ingresses into Aquarius. So again, this is your 12th house of isolation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, self-sabotage, hidden enemies. Now, the thing is with this is like the most positive way to frame the 12th house is that it is about isolation, alienation, and just taking time away to like be more by yourself. Healing rules the 12th house too. But the issue is Mars is fights and conflicts. Mars is frustration. And with it conjoining Pluto, the way I've been analogizing this is like it's very much like a revolution, like a revolt, like a rebellion. And so this seems to be like a real intense power surge of frustration, anger, and even fears that are kind of manifesting in front of you. Now, the other part of this is Saturn rules your 12th house, and it's in your first house. The first house rules the body, the self, your image. And so there's kind of like, since March of 2023, there's been this, you know, a lot more clarity of seeing how you get in your own way, how you see like, it's like, oh, this is where I stop myself. Oh, this is where my fears and phobias come from, and literally how it totally fucks up everything. And so Mars conjoining Pluto is kind of like, on one end, kind of like a schizo moment, on like one end being like very afraid and withdrawing from the world. But on another level, it is kind of like really looking deep down inside and being like, Why am I doing this? I need to not let this disempower me. I need to not let this control my life. Now, Mars does rule your ninth house of spirituality and beliefs, and it's going into the 12th house, where there is this kind of like, when I think of like Mars doing like gnarly stuff, either in the ninth house or ruling the ninth house, it reminds me of like shaking your fist at God. And with your ninth ruler going into the 12th, this might be uncovering certain beliefs that don't necessarily serve you. Looking at your worldview in a more cynical sense. It's also your second ruler of finances, and it is going into the 12th house of, again, hidden enemies. So Mars conjoining Pluto might be like some sort of an issue with money that you don't really see coming, nor do you really see how it happened. There might be some sort of a loss with money, but that comes with a caveat. And when we get to February 17th, this is when Venus conjoins Pluto. Venus will ingress into Aquarius and conjoin Pluto, again, still in your 12th house. So all of these same topics. Now, the difference here is Venus rules your 8th house of other people's resources, shared resources, your partner's money, debt, death, taxes, inheritance, all of that good stuff. And it also rules your 3rd house, which is like siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, communication, writing, and that's going into your 12th house. Now, the thing is with this, like when Mars goes into Aquarius and conjoins Pluto, this is like a frustration and anger, like again, like a revolt, versus Venus now is about having fun here. Venus is about at least having more pleasure here. And I think the big thing to know about February is just everything's in your 12th house. So like if you don't feel energized during February, that's what the astrology looks like. Being more reclusive, being more hidden, being more isolated, kind of again, seeing where you get in your own way. Your 8th ruler of shared resources and other people's money is going to be in the 12th house of like, again, being hidden, being away. And it's also your 3rd ruler of like short distance travel and neighbors and siblings and things like that being in the 12th house. So there might be some sort of strife or conflict related to those things. But it's kind of like nice in a sense where it's like, maybe you're not as, out and about in your community. Maybe you're not as vocal or connected with these local people. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you need that because, again, everything's just locked into your 12th house at this point. And so the thing is with Venus conjoining Pluto is if Venus is love and pleasure and connection and indulgence and she conjoins Pluto, there's kind of this like, sometimes it feels good to run away. Sometimes it feels good to just isolate yourself. Sometimes it feels good to just like really wash out like your shitty subconscious beliefs. That's kind of what's going on here. And then we get to February 22nd, and this is when Venus conjoins Mars. And what I like about this is still the same energy, but it's away from Pluto. So it's not as extreme. It's not as like, overwhelming. It's much more about like, okay, like, how do I take my time and have fun in this area? What do I need to and again, it's kind of like when you take away everything from the outside world and you're left with nothing, you really kind of get a closer look of like who you are and what you're doing. And so I just think Venus, your 2nd ruler of money and your 3rd ruler of, short distance travel, neighbors, siblings, things like that are in your 12th house. There's a little bit of like, frustration around siblings and money, but it's also your 9th house of spirituality, religion, astrology, publishing, broadcasting, social media with your 8th ruler. Now the 8th ruler, the 8th house also rules like the occult and secrets and stuff like that. But it's again, like shared resources, other people's resources, pretty much that stuff, and it's in your 12th house. So there seems to be like an abandonment of these topics and you kind of like going into the wild on your own here. And that will be a little mentally anguishing, but I think that this is like a good time to just be by yourself, be like reclusive, if that's the word that I'm thinking of here, and just spending more time alone, going through your beliefs, going through your subconscious and being like, why do I do that? So then we get to February 27th and 28th. This is when we're going to be having the Mercury and Saturn cazimi. Now, if you're not familiar with what a cazimi is, this is when the sun conjoins a planet or a planet conjoins the sun. Essentially, this is like this planet's birthday. It is resetting the topics of that planet. Now, every planet goes cazimi at least like once a year, except like Mars. That's kind of a different story. But Mercury, we get like 6 to 8 cazimis a year, depending on the context. And with Saturn, we get at least one a year. Now, I really want to talk about Saturn for a second. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out my video about Saturn and Pisces. Saturn's going to be in Pisces from all of 23, 24, and a lot of 25. So if you want to know what that really means for you more in depth, go ahead and watch that video. But I want you to think about March of 2023. This is when Saturn ingressed into Pisces. Saturn rules your 11th house of friends and community and networks. And it also rules your 12th house of hidden enemies, isolation, the subconscious fears and phobias. And Saturn entered your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. And so for one, this might be a lot more like strengthening connections with friendships. But then another way of looking at it is like, how do you sabotage those relationships? How do you get in your own way? It's very like in your face since March of 2023. But what I'm trying to get at here is, and I'm going to be using this analogy as we continue on, but when Saturn ingressed into Pisces, into your first house, Saturn is restrictions and discipline and maturity and responsibility. And it's in your first house of your body and yourself. So there might be like losing weight or having to be more responsible or feeling a lot more serious than maybe you normally would. Saturn going through the first house is just like a big growing up phase. And as Saturn went into your first house in March, from March to June, Saturn was direct. And the way I've been analogizing this is like you just started a job and you're getting on the spot training. It's like, here are your new responsibilities. Here are your new restrictions. Here are your new obligations that you have to handle. That's, again, and this is all first house stuff. So it could be related to your body and health, could be just related to your overall attitude and your overall personality. But from March to June, it was like being introduced to these new things. Then from June to November of 2023 was like, okay, here, it's like when you're not getting on the spot training anymore at this new job and it's your first couple days or first couple weeks on your own, you're actually like, handling your obligations, doing your responsibilities, and you're kind of learning and navigating how to actually do those things. Like you're getting used to it, you're getting comfortable with it, and you're having to do the work. Saturn moving direct is like doing the school work. And then Saturn going retrograde is like doing the field work. Like everything makes sense on a piece of paper, but then when you go outside and you actually do it, sometimes there's a lot more problems. So from June to November of 2023, Saturn was retrograde. And that's when you were kind of, again, like, I have to do this, I have to do that. And then from November of 2023 until about this point, Saturn was direct and moving forward in that same area that it was direct and retrograde again. This is where you feel a lot more comfortable. You're like, okay, I know what my responsibilities are. I know what my duties are. I think I can handle this. I'm growing up. When we get to the Saturn Cazimi point, this is restarting that narrative. From here of 2024 until June of 2024, this is, again, being introduced to more responsibility, more maturity, more restrictions, more limitations, and being introduced to what your new area of responsibility looks like. And this will continue from February to June. That's what the Saturn Cazimi is. But the other thing is, this is also the Mercury Cazimi. And this is what I want to get into now. So Mercury rules over your fourth house of home and family and living situation, as well as your seventh house of relationships. And so Mercury Cazimi is typically like some sort of a message is given to you. Some sort of an idea is had. Like there's a lot of clarity with Mercury Cazimis because Mercury is about ideas and communication. The issue is, it's in detriment in Pisces. Mercury doesn't do all that well. And so while there might be this idea or this kind of like clarity around something, it's still like an uncertain clarity. Mercury is in your seventh ruler of relationships, and it's in detriment in your first house. So this might be someone else, your partner, a relationship, a significant other, telling you something that like needs to be said, but that creates more uncertainty. It's the same thing with your fourth ruler of home and family and living situation going Cazimi, where there's this kind of like, okay, I've received some sort of message, but I don't really know what that means. I don't really know what the details of that are. It's like right when you receive an email where you think you're supposed to be like clear on a certain subject, it actually gets more confusing. Then at the same time, this is like, again, a change in friendships, a change in, again, how you perceive yourself in terms of like getting in your own way and all that kind of good stuff. So that's kind of a big deal, but that leads us to March. By March, things get a little bit weird, but I think honestly for you guys, it gets a lot better. The first transit that we have is March 9th. This is Mars squaring Uranus. Mars will be in your 12th house again of isolation and hidden enemies, and squaring Uranus in your third house of neighbors. Did I spell neighbors correctly? I think I spelled neighbors correctly. Short distance travel, siblings, all that kind of good stuff. I think I said travel. Mercury just entered Capricorn, so never mind. I would say Mercury's in Sag right now. I'm not speaking well. But when we get to this Mars-Uranus square, what I think I would have you guys be wary of is, again, like suspicious people that are around your neighborhood. Mars is also your second ruler of money and finances and resources. It's in your 12th house, squaring Uranus in the third house of like cars, short distance travel. And Mars square Uranus is like a big disruption. Like it doesn't really bend, it snaps, it breaks. This is kind of like having a falling out with a neighbor, or your car gets sideswiped and your mirror gets broken, and there's no note left on the car and you have to pay for it. That's how I look at this, but also this is kind of like a snapping moment. Mars is in your 12th house, feeling frustrated, and it's squaring Uranus at least allows for a room for breakthrough. I would argue this is more bad than good, but it is one of those opportunities, though, where maybe you need a breakthrough, especially around money, finances, and resources. And again, your 9th house of spirituality and beliefs. So then we get to March 11th. This is when Venus ingresses into Pisces. I love this for you guys, because again, it's going into your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, identity. With Saturn being here, and there's a lot more weight and heaviness related to what your responsibilities are, how you view yourself, Venus comes in and joins the party where it's a lot more fun, where it's like, okay, these are my new restrictions and responsibilities, but now I can at least have fun here. I can at least be creative here. Venus going through your first house. Venus is exalted in Pisces. It does so well. This is feeling creative, being able to express yourself, and like looking good too. Like Venus is beauty and it's going through your first house of body. So I think you're looking really good at this point. So we like that. Then by March 18th, this is when Mercury enters shadow. And this is going to be in your second house of money and possessions. Now, at this point, this is when everything builds up for April. April is the wildest month of the year. I think January is a lot more focused on like work and socializing. February for you guys is just being hidden away, tucked away. March is when I think you're going to be more expressive and feeling good. And then April is just absolute craziness. So Mercury is going to enter shadow. That means we will have a Mercury retrograde in your second house of money, finances, and resources. There's going to be quite a bit of change regarding your relationship to money and finances, and having to spend money and how you make it and how you save it and all of that stuff. Like all of April is like money stuff for you guys. So Mercury will enter shadow. We're going to get to that. Oh, that might also be like delays with money, reevaluation of your finances, that sort of a thing. But then that brings us to March 25th, and this is the lunar eclipse in Libra. I want you to think about October 12th, 13th of 2023. This is when we had our first solar eclipse in Libra, in your 8th house of other people's money, shared resources, death, debt. And what shifted for you around that time? What, if you're in a committed relationship, was your partner making less money and then you were more of the breadwinner? Were you losing access to other people's resources? Did this change your relationship to other people's resources in a significant way? Because this lunar eclipse is going to bring all of that up again. And this then also starts eclipse season, which is the wildest 2 weeks where a lot of things end and begin every 6 months. So at this point, the sun is in your second house. We're starting to really focus in more on the money and the finances. But with this lunar eclipse happening in your 8th house, this is kind of coming back to, okay, do I have access to other people's resources? Do I need to move on from other people's resources? Is there a significant death that is getting involved this year? The eclipses in the 2nd and the 8th do sometimes bring about a death. So that's something to consider. So then we get to April. And again, this is when everything goes crazy. So by April 1st, we have Mercury stationing retrograde in your second house of money and possessions. So I think it's interesting that we have this, again, this Mercury, this eclipse in your 8th house, with then Mercury going retrograde in your second house, where it's like, oh, maybe I have some sort of debt that I forgot about or some sort of payment I forgot about. And then all of a sudden, I've got to now like readjust my finances, reconfigure my finances and what I'm supposed to do. There might be a delay with money, and this might be regarding parents or home or living situation or significant relationships. But then that brings us to the solar eclipse in Aries. This is actually our first solar eclipse in Aries that we get. And this is also in your second house of money and possessions. Now, again, eclipses are major endings or major beginnings to something. And they always feel like emergency situations. They always feel like you've got to do this or you've got to do that. And so there seems to be a major shift with your finances once we get to about April 8th. Now, this could be good or bad. This might be like a major expense happens, or it's like all of a sudden it's time to make some money. It's time to actually like work super duper hard. There's the easiest way to explain is that there's an extreme urgency and extreme feeling with money. So that might be like, hey, you're now making good money, but now you've got to spend it everywhere. Or it's like, I have this expense, I got to spend this, I got to do that. Like The North Node in your second is like really bringing a lot of tenacity to your finances. But what's more interesting and what makes this time of the astrology so intense is 2 days later, on April 10th, we have the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Now, Mars-Saturn conjunctions are typically a big deal anyway, but the fact that we just came off of an eclipse that was ruled by Mars and then Mars conjoined Saturn is like pretty auspicious. It is in your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. And so in order to get an idea of this, I want you to think about what was going on for you when lockdowns happened. When lockdowns happened at the end of March, beginning of April, that was right when Saturn moved into Aquarius, and it was right when Mars moved into Aquarius and conjoined Saturn in your 12th. Now, the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius is very like lockdowns, isolate yourself from society. But that would have been like double true for you because it's your 12th ruler of isolation, alienation, self-sabotage, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself, fears, phobias. So there would have been like a real heaviness in your subconscious and like feeling really isolated and feeling almost paranoid. This kind of same extreme, and again, the reason why this is more extreme is this is your 12th house. But that same kind of like overwhelming is not the right word, but just serious energy is happening now in your first house of your body, yourself, your image. So with Mars conjoining Saturn, this is again like a lockdown, or like this is where there's an extreme amount of like negative energy happening. And or at least with Mars conjoining Saturn, like time to really take shit seriously. And this is your second ruler in the first house. So this might be potential injury. This might be like a big expense on your body or yourself that has to happen. It's also ninth house related. So again, spirituality, travel, all of that stuff. But it's conjoining your 11th ruler and your 12th ruler. So this seems to be kind of like there's a big expense that's happening, and you're kind of forced to like reckon with like, how have you gotten in your way with that? Do you have friends and networks that can help you get out of that situation? That might be something career related as well. But this just seems like a real, like, again, Mars is in your first house too. You're feeling frustrated. You're feeling, a little bit pissed off. You're probably going to be more pissed off at this time is an easy way to look at it. And then this is where it gets weird. We have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction 10 days later on April 20th, 420. Super easy day to remember. Now, the thing is with this is like we just get off like pretty much one of the worst transits of the year, and then we get the best transit of the year, which is this is Jupiter conjoining your in your third house of siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, communication, technology, writing. And Jupiter is your ruling planet. So, Jupiter's a bigger deal for you guys than normal. And it's also your 10th ruler of career and reputation and legacy. And so it's conjoining Uranus in your third house, where this just seems like an explosive new, like Jupiter is abundance and fortune and faith. And it's conjoining Uranus of liberation, freedom, innovation. It is instability. But the thing is here, and Jupiter is positive 80% of the time. Jupiter's been through your third house since May of 2023. So there's been some expansion with, siblings, neighbors. There's been some expansion with writing and communication. There's been more of a good feeling related to your local area, your local community and neighborhood. And then Jupiter conjoining Uranus is just kind of like striking gold almost in a sense, where this does have a lot to do with your career. And this does have a lot to do with your first house of like literally just what you're doing, spending more time doing short distance travel, spending more time with neighbors, siblings. There's some sort of like, again, striking gold, striking oil kind of analogy here. Now, it will be kind of shocking in a disruptive and like hard to comprehend way. And again, 80% of the time, Jupiter's good. 20% of the time, Jupiter will bring something that kind of like is stressful and chaotic, but that like forces you to think about your faith and your own beliefs and your goodwill and what, gratitude you have for this area. So then right after that, Mars goes into Aries on April 30th. So this is either good or bad. It's in your second house of money and possessions. And there's two things going on here. Number one, things get really extreme with money at this point. But the one way to look at it is, again, if you're a day chart, Mars burns. And so Mars is going to be going through your second house of cash, like burning through cash, big expenses. I want you to think about May and June of 2022. That was the last time we had Mars in Aries, and what was going on for you regarding money and finances, because that will give you a good idea of what this will look like. Now, the other thing, though, is that your second ruler is really well placed. So while you're not only spending money, there is money to spend at this point. and Mercury is direct at this point, even though it's still in shadow. So this is like right after all of this money stuff gets changed, Mars goes into Aries, where it's like, okay, your second ruler is strong, money should be good, but it's Mars in Aries. Like, you're spending it through it, you are burning through it. Now, this leads me to May. Before I get into the specific transits that I have for May, I want to just show you what's kind of going on here. When we look at May, look at all of these things going on in your third house. I genuinely believe May and June are the best months of the year. And look, we have Venus, we have the Sun, Uranus, Jupiter, all of these benefic planets in your third house. So there's just like a really rich quality to your neighborhood, to siblings, to short distance travel, to communication, to writing. I just think things are doing really, really well here in a very funky. And the other way I like to view the third house is applying knowledge that you already have. And so, like, if the ninth house is learning more and educating yourself more, the third house is like, okay, do you actually know how to apply that stuff? And so it just seems like there's an easier time doing that. It just seems like there's a more rich and fulfilling time doing that. Like, you know, your neighborhood's looking nice. You're enjoying where you're at. You're enjoying the people around you. That's probably the most important thing. So let's get back to May now. One second, I need a water break. So the first thing that we've got going on is on May 13th, Mercury is going to leave shadow. We're all done with this whole delay stuff with money. Mercury entered shadow on March 18th, and it doesn't leave shadow till May 13th. So we get like 2 months of, you know, delays and slowdowns with money and reconfiguration of money and all of that stuff, right? Then once we get to the 19th, Mars conjoins the North Node in your second house of money and possession. So a lot of money stuff for you guys this year. Now, the thing is with this is Mars going into Aries, and this is why I was saying, like, you know, think about 2022, that May and June time, because that will give you a real good idea of what this is going to look like. But this is just turning up the notch to 11. This is bringing an extreme moment with both money and finances and possessions related to also far distance traveling, spirituality, religion, higher education, teaching. There's like this, like, again, Mars is already like really like fast and ambitious and wanting to start things in Aries. But as it conjoins the North Node, it's like, I got to start this. I got to do this. Like, it's just cranking that energy up to an 11. So there is this real extreme moment with money going on here. And that might be good. You might be making some real good money and getting that like high off of it. But the other part of it is like, you might have some serious expenses coming up here where you got to like really work your ass off to get there. Now, the thing I like though is that look at all this stuff in your third house. It's like you're in a situation in which it is easy to apply these topics. Although like it's easy to do the thing that you need to do. Although the money's extreme. And this is also the Sun Jupiter Cazimi that we've got going on the 18th. So this is maybe starting a new job, starting new work. This is the Sun ruling your sixth house of work, labor, conjoining your 10th ruler of career. Maybe this is a new start, a new beginning with your work that might involve a lot more money. So we like that. Then Jupiter enters Gemini on May 25th. And this is happening in your fourth house of home, family, and living situation. And parents, more specifically. So the thing is with this is now Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So Jupiter is going into your fourth house of home and family and living situation. So this might be trying to buy a new place. This is expanding your living situation. The problem is it's Gemini. It's dual signed. So this is like maybe you're buying a second house. Maybe you're, you know, going back and forth to places. And it's in detriment. So this is the other thing is like your 10th ruler of career is in detriment of the fourth house of living situation and home and parents. So there's some sort of issue with work related to your living situation. And it's also your ascendant ruler, like your body, yourself, your image, in detriment in the fourth house, where it's like you're feeling either like low energy or you're like stuck at home more in a place that maybe you don't want to be. And career stuff is not doing as well because of the living situation. But it's Jupiter. Again, Jupiter is going to be positive 80% of the time. And it is expansion and it is fortune and abundance, but it's in detriment in Gemini. It's trying to do two things. Now, the thing is with this is this is just about taking the opportunity. We're going to get to the caveats and why this isn't going to work and how you're going to need to readjust things throughout the year. But for right now, this is just the expansion and taking the opportunity. I want you to think about 2012. What was going on around May, June, July of 2012 regarding home, family, and living situation, both related to you and career? And what was there an expansion? Was there like kind of like a, you know, something good happening, but it came with a caveat because that was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini, and that'll give you an idea of what this is going to look like. But that brings us to June. In June, a lot of things are happening in Gemini. On June 4th, we have the Venus Cazimi in Gemini in your 4th house of home and living and parents. Now, there is an issue here. There is a potential death to talk about. What I would want you to think about is what was going on around May and June, probably June more likely, of 2016. The reason why I say that is Venus goes retrograde every 8 years in the exact same sign. But Venus makes her exterior conjunction to the sun and has her Cazimi in that sense also every 8 years in the exact same sign. And so the last time we got a Venus Cazimi in your in Gemini was June of 2016. Now, the reason I say a potential death is, for one, the nodes are in your 8th house. Eclipses open and close doors, and it's literally in your 8th house of death. And Venus is your 8th ruler. And a Cazimi is technically a formal death of something, of your 4th house of home, parents, things along those lines. So there could be a potential death happening here. I think that's something to think about. It's also your 3rd ruler, so short distance travel, neighbors, siblings. That's having a significant shift regarding your living situation. So not only besides the death stuff, but there seems to be some sort of new start, especially with Venus. Like Venus is, again, like redecorating and making things beautiful related to your living situation based off of your neighbors, short distance travel, communication, writing, and your 8th house. So like other people's resources. So like literally one time, I'm not a Pisces rising, but one time a buddy of mine had another buddy of his like abandon his whole apartment to like move across the country. And he said, just take whatever you want. And he got all of his apartment stuff. And I got literally like, and I was like super broke at this time. I had like nothing in my apartment. And so I got a ton of free furniture that helped me decorate my place. Like that's almost like what this reminds me of. It's just kind of like, hey, take all of my furniture, take all these things. And look what's going on in your 4th house too. It's like Mercury's in your 4th house, conjoining Jupiter in your 4th house. And then there's this Venus Cazimi in your 4th house. There's just a lot of action and energy towards family and living situation stuff that's changing here. So then we get to June 8th. This is when Mars enters Taurus. So Mars is fights and conflicts. Mars is in detriment in Taurus, where it's really slow, it's really stubborn. Where Mars wants to go really fast, Mars in Taurus is not going fast. And it's in your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, and short distance travel. So you will see some more arguments, more frustrations with short distance travel, neighbors, siblings. This could possibly even be related to, again, communication, writing. Your 2nd ruler is now in detriment in the 3rd. So there is this kind of like money's feeling a lot more slow, money not coming in as fast as it was. It's also your 9th ruler of spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, far distance travel, in detriment in the 3rd. So one way to look at this is like, you're really lacking applying the knowledge that you already have. And like, maybe there needs to be like a relearning phase at this point. I think another way to look at it is if you are traveling overseas at this time, there is this kind of like, maybe like the far distance travel is not going to go all that well because of short distance travel problems. So that's what's going on. And then we get to the 14th, and this is when we have the Mercury Cazimi, again, in your 4th house of home and living situation. So there's all of these new starts in your living situation happening here. And we get this Mercury Cazimi, which is like literally resetting your 4th house of home and family and living situation. And it's your 7th ruler of relationships being, purified in your 4th house of home and family. So maybe you move in with a partner there's just so much changing with your living situation at this point. And this is kind of like the formality of it. It's like Jupiter goes in and expands. Venus Cazimi is like, oh, I have access to these shared resources. And then the Mercury Cazimi is like, all right, we are now in a new situation here. So a lot of stuff going on there. Then Saturn stations retrograde on June 30th. Again, 1st house of you, your body, yourself, your image. This is where we get to that point of like, okay, you know what your responsibilities are. You know what you have to do now. You've been introduced to all these concepts, and now it's just time for you to apply them. And so this is a kind of a slowdown. This is like, all right, like I know where I have to be more mature and disciplined and responsible now, and this is just doing that field work. So things will slow down a little bit. There is maybe a reconsideration of friendships, and it's also your 12th ruler going retrograde in the 1st, where it's like, okay, you have to do these things now. Are you going to get in your own way? Are you going to self-sabotage? Are you really seeing the things that, are in the back of your mind and how fast they play out right in front of you? So then that brings us to July. Now, the thing to understand is January through June is like the most intense time of this year. The summer is where things really slow down. Number one is we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction on July 15th. This is, again, in your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, short distance travel. We had a Mars-Uranus conjunction in August of 2022, August 1st of 2022. And so if you want an idea of what Mars and Taurus is going to be like, think about July and August of 2022 and what was slow, what was money like? Was there like this like frustration and stubbornness? But think about August 1st of 2022. That's going to give you a real good idea of what this one's going to be like, because that was our last Mars-Uranus conjunction. And Mars-Uranus conjunctions are very unstable. They're very chaotic. It's your second, like, again, it's your second ruler moving really slow. And the way I've been analogizing Mars and Taurus conjoining Uranus in Taurus is like, if you've been laying in a bed for like 2 months and you haven't even got up, not even to use the restroom or to eat, and then all of a sudden, you know, there's like a fire and you have to jump out of your bed, like you will probably get a blood clot and die, or you will like snap your legs. Like Mars conjoining Uranus is some sort of all of a sudden extreme movement, all of a sudden some sort of like frustrating breakthrough. Again, it's your ninth ruler, so, far distance travel, spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, conjoining Uranus. Like it's some sort of major uncomfortable disruption here. Same thing with second house of money and finances and resources conjoining Uranus, where it's just like, you know, again, random car expense comes up, fight and conflict with neighbor, fight and conflict with sibling, or, you know, some sort of crazy thing happening in your neighborhood. Then the next day on July 16th is when Mercury enters shadow. This is where Mercury is going to retrograde. It'll come back to, and it's in your sixth house of work, health, pets, routines. So as Mercury is going through here, Mercury will retrograde in your seventh house of relationships. But as Mercury is in your sixth house, this seems to be like a change regarding your, like, again, it's not like your job title. Like the 10th house is a job title that you wear. The sixth house is the labor that goes into it. So this would be like changing your schedule, changing your actual workload and what you do every day. There's going to be something going on here related to both relationships and living situation, that like your work, your schedule, your routine, and even health things are going to come up. Then Mars enters Gemini on July 20th. This is again in your fourth house of home, living situation, and parents. Think about October of 2022 through March of 2023. We had Mars retrograding in Gemini, where Mars was in your fourth house for a long, long time. And think about any sort of fights or conflicts or frustrations that you had with your living situation. What was going on then? Now, that like September, October, November, December of 2022 and January, February, March of 2023 was way, way worse, because we had this Mars retrograde here, really gnarly. This is like, again, Jupiter and Gemini is trying to take advantage of these two things and juggling these things, but then Mars gets thrown into the mix and it's starting to become more difficult. You know, Mars is, again, fights, conflicts, frustration, and with it being in Gemini, it's like really trying to do this thing, that thing, this thing, that thing, going back and forth. So again, maybe fights and conflicts with parents, problems with the living situation, especially related to money. But that brings us to August. And in August, the first thing we've got going on is on August 5th, Mercury stationing retrograde in your seventh house of relationships, your partner, your spouse, or any other significant individuals. And so as Mercury goes retrograde here, this is some sort of a delay, a rethinking, or a miscommunication regarding a relationship, regarding a significant other. This also might be in regard to a family member, because this is your fourth ruler of family, parents, and living situation going retrograde in the seventh. So if you've got a roommate, like some sort of a delay or a problem with them, this is some sort of a, again, slow down, miscommunication, delay, you know, rethinking of a situation going on with relationships at this time. But then that brings us to August 14th. This is when we have the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in your fourth house of home and living and parents. And I think this is really important, because this is like when things really blow up. Like the way I've been kind of analogizing it for everybody is this is, if you are juggling 5 items, but then someone throws in a 6th item and then everything falls apart. This is your second ruler of money conjoining your ascendant ruler in the fourth house. So there seems to be another big major expense. It's also your ninth ruler of spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, conjoining your 10th ruler of career. And it's like all of the things that you're trying to juggle, especially related to like career and traveling or money and what you're trying to do with your own self, like things just kind of explode in 2 different directions. And this is really important because this builds us up for the Jupiter-Saturn square on August 19th. This is the caveat I was talking about, because again, Jupiter's in your 4th, Saturn's in your 1st. And this is what's going on. Jupiter in your fourth is like, I'm going to try to take advantage of both of these things that I've got going on, maybe living here, maybe living there, having both of these options. But then when this Mars Jupiter conjunction happens, something, frustrating happens here at the minimum. And when Jupiter squares Saturn, and Saturn's retrograde in your first house, you're like being like, okay, I'm doing the field work of being more responsible, being more mature. You get to this point where you're like, oh, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could balance these two things. I don't know if I could take advantage of both of these things. And I might have gotten myself in a funky situation. I don't think that this is necessarily bad, but this is kind of like, hey, you're going to like, there's a kind of a wake up call here of like, your 10th ruler of career is squaring your 11th ruler of friends, and your 12th house of hidden enemies, self-sabotage related to your first house of you. And it's your first ruler too, where this is kind of like, you see how you get in your own way regarding you and this living situation stuff. So there seems to be some sort of like, not like a conflict of interest, but just kind of like there being a moment of clarity where you go, oh, something isn't working here. I think I might have taken on too much than I can handle. And right now I'm at a point where I'm learning to be more responsible and be more mature. And this is like that wake up where you're just kind of like, oh, I might have taken on a bit off more than I can chew. We get to September. September is like the most boring month. Pluto will go back into Capricorn, okay, in your first house. Uh-oh. Did my pen die? No? All right. Sorry, Pisces. Give me a second. There we go. Pluto moves back into Capricorn on September 1st. Honestly, I mean, it's been here for 16 years. It's only going to be here for 5 more minutes. I just think now the power, fear stuff goes back into the 11th house of friends, networks, community. I really am not tripping about Pluto and Capricorn, to be honest with you. I don't really care about it. But then Venus conjoins the South Node on September 3rd. Now, this is in your 8th house of other people's money, death, debt, inheritance. I want you to think about what was going on in the end of November of 2023, because that was the last time we had a Venus South Node conjunction. And I've been thinking a lot about the Venus South Node conjunction is very bittersweet. Like while something might be very nice, you no longer want it or you no longer enjoy it. Like Venus in Libra, it's like, oh, I have good things. I like my things. Or these things that I have are nice, but I no longer like them. But this is also in your 8th house of, again, other people's money, shared resources. So this is like, not being as dependent on, a shared resource, or maybe and again, the South Node brings things up from the past too. So maybe this is some sort of past money that you're owed that you get. It's also your 3rd ruler of neighbors, siblings, short distance travel, that sort of a thing, kind of either returning and being in a really well situated place, but there's something draining and exhausting about it, like in terms of pleasures, connections related to other people's resources, death, and inheritance. But that brings us to the next day on September 4th, and this is when Mars ingresses into Cancer. So it will enter your 5th house of creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, hobbies, art, music, drugs, alcohol. I want you to think about April of 2023 and what was going on in April of 2023 regarding love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. Because as Mars goes back in here, there will be a very similar vibe, but this time it's different because Mars will eventually enter shadow and go retrograde. Now, Mars rules your 2nd house of money, and it is fallen in your 5th house. So this is like, if you have kids, this is like a lot more bigger expenses, and your money's going straight towards your children. This is kind of like spending money maybe you don't have regarding partying or your recreation or music. It's also your 9th ruler of like publishing, broadcasting, and spirituality and beliefs, fallen in your 5th house. So this might be like, a lack of creativity here, or weakness related to your beliefs. And I think the key of this is like with Mars and Cancer in the 5th house is like, you need to take care of yourself. Because like Mars is about fights and conflicts, and Cancer is about like babies and nurturing and protecting. Number one, Mars and Cancer is very like defensive. It's very like crabby. So it like maybe like Mars and Cancer is like, I'm not enjoying this and I don't like that and nothing's, pleasing me. I'm not getting off. But a way I look at Mars and Cancer is like in the 5th house is like, maybe you need to do more creative stuff for the sense of like healing. Maybe you need to spend more time, again, doing recreational and creative stuff for a sense of healing, if that makes sense. But this is feeling kind of crabby about the whole situation. So then we get to October. Once we get to October 2nd, we have that another solar eclipse in Libra, again, still in your 8th house. Think about what was going on in that October 12th, 13th time, because that was the last time that we had a solar eclipse in your 8th house, and what significantly shifted with you regarding other people's resources, shared resources, death, debt, inheritance. This is also the Mercury Cazimi happening here. So there's something going, again, eclipse in your 8th house, your 4th ruler getting eclipse. I just wouldn't be surprised if it was like a, if you have a parent that is like, sick or not doing well, or if you have a grandparent, there seems to be some sort of, like, again, I'm usually better about this when it comes to like consultations because I get a lot more information, but like this really does seem like kind of a significant death coming up here. Possibly, at least the context is there for it. But this is a big moving on and a big pivot and a big door opening or a big door closing related to shared resources and other people's money. So then after that, Mars enters shadow 2 days later. We are going to get a Mars retrograde in your 5th house of creativity, love, children, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. And so there's going to be something that comes up on this day that you're going to return back to in March of 2025. So there's something here related to money, finances, and resources, and spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, social media, and teaching that is going to come up here where you're like, I'm not satisfied, I'm crabby, I'm not getting what I want, that you will come back to here very soon. We'll talk about that more once we get to 2025. But then we have Jupiter stationing retrograde on the 9th. So this is the slowdown in the 4th house of home, family, and living situation. Where Jupiter is expanding, this is contracting a little bit. And the way I like to look at it is like when Jupiter's in your 4th house and Jupiter's direct, it's like everything's going your way. When Jupiter goes retrograde and everything's not going your way, do you still have faith? Are you still grateful for the situations that you're in? Because that's kind of the energy that's going on here. And it's the same thing with the Saturn retrograde. This is like the field work. Like Jupiter going through your 4th house is like, again, sitting in a classroom being like, oh, this is easy to understand and this all makes sense. But then Jupiter goes retrograde, you got to apply it in the real world, in the field. And you're like, oh, how do I actually do this? So this is your ascendant ruler going retrograde. Saturn is now still retrograde in your 1st house. So there's kind of like just a big slowdown in everything at this point for you. And plus Mars is in shadow. And I mean, look, the sun's fallen, Mars is fallen, Jupiter is fallen, Venus is fallen. There's just like a lack of fun energy at this time. Then, okay, so I might have fucked up. This might not be a lunar eclipse in Aries on October 17th. Technically, I think the eclipses happen in Virgo and Pisces. I'm not too worried about that though, because there's so much on that Virgo Pisces axis that actually happens in 2025 that I still think this is more important because this is still in your 2nd house of money and possessions. This is coming back to what was going on in April with money. And the thing is here is this is this full moon / eclipse in your 2nd house of money, finances, and resources. Your 2nd ruler is fallen in the 5th. The sun is fallen. Like, again, there's this kind of big look at like, what am I doing? Why am I not doing this? Why am I crabby? What do I need to change here? This is like a big highlight of like weaknesses. And that's really for everybody, by the way. And so then we get to November, and then we have Mars ingressing into Leo on November 3rd. Now Mars is going to be going into your 6th house of work, health, habits, pets, routines. And what I like about Mars in Leo is that it's not Mars in Cancer. And so Mars going into Leo is feeling very proud, feeling very confident, feeling very courageous, but that's not going to last forever. And I'm going to explain why here in a second. Let's just get to it. But Mars does rule fights and conflicts, energy and ambition. It's Mars in Leo. So again, saying it with your chest, being confident. Your 2nd ruler, Mars going through your 6th house is more potential for injury, problems with pets, coworkers, employees, more fights and conflicts there. But there's a lot more energy going on with your work and your career. I mean, now everything's in your 10th house of career. Mars is there. So I think money is doing good, but that comes with a caveat, which we'll get to in just a minute. Then Mercury enters shadow on November 7th. And again, in your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. So we will have another Mercury retrograde in your 10th house of career. I think this is the funniest Mercury retrograde that we've gotten in a very, very long time. I've been kind of coining it Dumb and Dumber, and I will explain why once Mercury goes retro, once we actually get there. But this is another delay, another rethinking and a reevaluation with your career, your work, your day-to-day activities, and we're going to get to why that is. So then we get to November 19th. Pluto enters Aquarius in the 12th house. Again, back to where we were for the most part of the year. But what's important about this is from November of 2024 to July of 2025, every major planet, so every outer planet is going to ingress into a new zodiac sign. Pluto moves into Aquarius, Neptune moves into Aries, Uranus moves into Gemini, Saturn moves into Aries, and Jupiter enters Cancer. So from this point onward, there is a lot of major shifts that are happening in the world and in the astrology. And so then we get to November 15th, and I know I just said the 19th, and we're going a little bit backwards here, but bear with me. But Saturn stations direct, again, in your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. And so a lot of this is like, okay, I now know what I need. Like I'm more comfortable with the responsibilities I have to take. I know what I need to do, where I need to be, all that kind of good stuff. So there is this better sense of like, I know what I must do and I'm going to do it. And I feel more comfortable at this point doing these things. And then we get to November 25th. This is when Mercury stations retrograde. So again, this is that reevaluation and that slowdown regarding career, reputation, legacy. So why I think this one is so funny is your fourth ruler of home and family and living situation is in detriment in the 10th house of career, and it will go retrograde here. But your 10th ruler of career is in detriment in your fourth house of living situation. So Mercury and Jupiter are doing a little wife swap. They're in each other's houses. They're both in detriment, and they're both going to go retrograde. So like I said before, like in June, when Jupiter enters your fourth house and it's like problems with career because of home, family, living situation stuff, this is when this gets sorted out. When you're like, all right, I need to do a reconfiguration of my living situation and my family and career stuff. You know, maybe you spend too much time at home and not enough time with career, or maybe you're spending too much time with career and your home is lacking. That's kind of the idea here. So that is what gets resolved throughout November and December. But then we get to December, and then Mars stations retrograde. So what's interesting is Mercury is going to be retrograde during this time in your 10th house of career, but then Mars stations retrograde in your 6th house of work and your health, pets, and routines. So the problem with Mars in Leo is, well, I should say Mars retrograding in Leo is, the way I've been speaking about it is it's like having your tail tucked between your legs. It's like losing that confidence. It's losing that courageousness. It's all bark, no bite. There is some sort of a slow movement feeling. And I mean, again, like Mercury's retrograde, Mars retrograde, Jupiter's retrograde. Your 10th ruler's retrograde, your second ruler's retrograde. There seems to be a really big reconfiguration and slowdown related to work and career. Mars going through your 6th house may be a loss of a job. This might also be problems with health and body and even pets. But this is having your tail tucked between your legs, where it's like, maybe you wanted to start this new ambitious thing, and then it's like, you lose the faith, you lose the courageousness, you lose the, bravado here. And something to keep in mind is, I know this sounds negative, but Mars will go back into Cancer all through March, but this is okay. Jupiter is going to go through your 5th house and 6th house between 2025 and 2026. So whatever problems end up happening here, we'll have a resolve. We'll have a resolution by the time we get through all of 2025 and 2026. So there's a lot of good hope here, but it's like, this is where you're going to see the problems with work, labor, related to finances, related to career, and even like passions and pleasures and things like that. So then Mercury stations direct on the 16th. This is where it's like, okay, all right, like I know, like now that there's been these delays and things have been handled with my career, I know where to move forward now. Then on Christmas Eve, we get the Jupiter-Saturn square again. And so this is why this one's different, is in August, it was, I'm trying to take advantage of these opportunities, and it's now clicking to me that I don't have the resources to be able to handle all of this. Like where I need to be more mature and disciplined and responsible over, like, means this may not work. And then we get to this point, and this is where you make that decision. Where again, I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned this when we talked about August, where it's like, you're not about to make a decision yet, but this is where the decision comes in, where it's like, okay, I know what I must do, and because I'm being more responsible and more mature in this area, I have to kind of maybe, not take advantage of both of these. Like, for example, let's say, you have a house in LA and New York, and you're like, I just bought this house in New York, and now I go back and forth, to LA and New York whenever I want. And this is kind of like, you get to a point in August where you're like, okay, like let's say you're in New York and then something major happens in LA that you have to be there for. And, trying to get the flights and trying to get all the details. It's like, this is too much to do. This is the point where you're like, all right, I need to sell this house in LA or sell this house in New York. And it's not necessarily about like picking one, but just realizing that you can only be responsible and control so much. And that might mean that you can't really necessarily be having your cake and eating it too regarding the living situation stuff. And that's how we end this year, guys. So let me know again in the comments below what your opinions are, what you are most excited for, what you are the least excited for. Again, if you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out that transit calendar. If you want to get more in depth about what this year and next year looks like for you, feel free to book a consultation. And with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next time.